if I may begin with this, at times the United States seems so helpless against this threat of corporate cyber intrusion, hacking if you prefer. Can you blame companies for wanting to take matters into their own hands?
Well, I don't blame them, but I also don't condone that. I don't think that's the right strategy, nor that one we should push for. For one, while I can understand why companies would be upset, why they would want to push back, the fact is this could go the wrong way. For example, the company could escalate a crisis to where we don't want it to be. I think in this regard, it's a national responsibility, a government responsibility to respond to these, whether it's criminal, FBI, or if it's a nation state, Cyber Command and the NSA. You can't have companies escalate us into a crisis. So I think what the administration, what the government has put out today is in fact the correct approach. But companies can do more to protect their networks, and that's something perhaps we should discuss.
Well, we will get there in a moment, but if you're a corporate CEO, and these are the people you now advise, you have to share their frustration. Should you have to wait for the NSA, perhaps, or for the FBI to respond? And if so, how long does that take? When Sony gets hacked, arguably by the North Koreans, and perhaps not, we can get into that too, do you really have to wait around for the U.S. government to take action?
No, in fact, you bring out a great point. There's three things that we have to do. One, we have to help the companies have better cybersecurity. Two, we need cyber legislation. And three, we need an international set of relationships and a deterrence strategy with our allies that could block some of this. We need, if you put all that together, a national initiative in this area. It's not where you would have the companies do this alone. It's not where the government would do it alone. It's where we have to work together as a nation and with our allies. And we haven't done that. That's where we need to go, in my opinion.
When you say deterrence, what exactly do you have in mind? Because it's not like the Cold War, having a bunch of nuclear weapons because the Russians have a bunch of nuclear weapons, and the threat of mutually assured destruction isn't going to stop vigilante hackers in a place like China or Russia, for example.
Right. So we need a deterrence strategy, though, that incorporates just the types of activity that you laid out there. So you have criminal activity, you have theft of intellectual property, and now you have nation states using cyber as an element of national power. What we need to do is look at how do you bring all the capabilities that we can, how we help companies defend better, and recognize it's not just companies that are being hacked. Over the last 6 months, the White House, the Post Office, and several government agencies have been hacked as well. So if everybody's being hacked, our strategy for defense is broken. And we don't have cyber legislation that lets government and industry work together. And we don't have an international set of norms or a deterrence strategy that we can rely on that we could put up. Remember in the 60s, there was all this great work on developing a deterrence strategy for nuclear war. We need to take an analogous look at cyber and say, how are we going to now address this? Great things are happening in cyber. We don't want to slow that down, but we definitely have to fix our defense, the way our government works, and the way industry and government work together, and the way we work with our allies.
Well, it raises a couple of important questions, and let's begin with this one. If we liken it to nuclear warfare, these nation states or criminal enterprises are effectively dropping small nuclear bombs onto the United States and other Western countries right now. And we're responding with what exactly? It's great to build a defense system, let's say like the Israeli Iron Dome, and that may keep out some of the bombs, but it's not going to keep them all out. Why shouldn't, just for argument's sake, the U.S. government take, and Western nations in general, if they're going to cooperate, as you suggest, why shouldn't they take a more aggressive approach and use the kinds of tools and intelligence that were deployed in, say, the Stuxnet virus to more aggressively disable the computer networks and by extension, the hackers who are conducting these attacks to begin with?
Okay, so I don't take that off the table, but I put that in the realm of the government and our international community, our allies, to look at using, not companies to use. So I would put that on the table. That would be part of the deterrent strategy. What is it that we would do and under what conditions? how do we lay out what we will do when somebody tries to break into some of our industry? And when does the government step in? When does the FBI step in from a law enforcement perspective? When does the government step in from a Cyber Command Defense Department perspective? We have to lay that out.
Let's use a case example of North Korea and the hack against Sony. An unprecedented hack in the corporate world based on what we know. Did we, should we have responded by attacking North Korea? And is that in fact what the U.S. government did when North Korea went dark?
So, well, I don't know what the U.S. government did, and I can't comment on that. But let's go back to your initial question. So what should we have done? I think first, we should have a capability in place that when a company like Sony or any other industry is being exploited or attacked by a nation state, the government would know right away and could help defend before it got to the crisis state. You know, this had to be going on for several months that they were in the network. And as a consequence, Sony needs a better defense, needs a way for tipping the government to what's going on into their networks, because only Sony can really see that, and a way for alerting government, whether it's FBI or NSA Cyber Command, to what they're seeing so the government can take the necessary steps to help stop it. None of that's in place today. That's what we need. We need a national initiative to put all these different building blocks in place and get it going. You know, we've been talking about this for several years. It's time for action.
Well, in some cases, it's hard to know who's responsible. Let's again use this case example of Sony Entertainment. Based on what you know, and I'm qualifying that by pointing out, as you would, that you're no longer in government, are the North Koreans likely the ones responsible, as the FBI says, or did the White House perhaps jump on that one a little too quickly, because there is a growing body of evidence to suggest that at the very least a disgruntled ex-Sony employee was involved?
Yeah, so I would start back from the beginning. First, there's a lot of supposition going on out there. But if the FBI says that North Korea was responsible, my experience in working with the FBI is they are very conservative in making that kind of direct connection to anybody who's involved. As a consequence, I would put a very high level of confidence in what the FBI is saying. They've worked this, and they did it right. And they're very good. These are good people. They know what they're talking about. I think where it gets mixed up on the insider part is the hackers got in and stole credentials for some of the system administrators. My understanding from looking at what's gone on in the press and what we're seeing and what the U.S. CERT has put out is they've taken those credentials, they probably got those in the June, July, August time frame, and they incorporated that into some of their tools so that they could actually exploit and pull back some of the information that they have and also go into the networks. I doubt very seriously that there was an insider who got this going. Now, I know a lot of people say, well, we don't have enough information from the FBI to make that call. Well, my experience is the FBI wouldn't make that call if they didn't have that level of confidence. They're good at this.
The level of confidence based on the information that they have now, I would point to another example, the hack attack against J.P. Morgan earlier last year, which was initially attributed to the Russians. And that was on the basis of information partly gathered, again, this is my understanding, from government investigators. And now, again, there's a growing body of evidence that perhaps it wasn't, while you know the perpetrators may have been in Russia, it wasn't the kind of state-sponsored cyber terrorism, if you will, that people initially thought it might be.
So different sets of conditions. So you have one in North Korea where you have a direct exploit and attack against Sony, and you have coming out of Ukraine, Russia, sympathizers potentially with the Russian government who may have association with the Russian government. That's hard to actually identify. That's probably the shortfall in what you're picking on right here, picking up on, and that is who specifically directed it and why. You know from some of the information that's come out on the attack against all these companies, Target, Home Depot, J.P. Morgan, and others, that there was a nexus to the U.S. policy in the Ukraine. and some of that information was in the URLs or some of the website locations that these hackers actually pointed back to. Now, it doesn't mean that they weren't criminals, but it does mean that they may have either sympathized or at least had insights to what their government wanted and perhaps some level of go-ahead from the government. That's supposition on my part.